Hey Marilyn, how you doing, my friend?
I am fabulous, thank you. How are you?
I am great, thank you. I just broke my fast recently. I don't know if you intermittent fast, but um, I received a message from yourself saying, "Yeah, I'm looking forward to this to the podcast," and I hadn't eaten yet. I was like, "I better eat." Almost ate the whole plate.
I did the same. I
Oh.
looked at the time and went, I haven't had breakfast and this might be 2 hours. I better eat.
Yeah, exactly right. So your name sort of came to my attention when I was in Clubhouse. So I was in Clubhouse in a room which was, I think it was based around motivation. And there was a lady who was talking about a certain trauma that she had gone through. I think she was deaf in one ear or something.
Okay.
But you can hear it in her voice that, it wasn't like a normal speech. As she was talking, you can hear something was going on. Like I think she was deaf or like close to being completely deaf. So when she spoke, you could hear it in her voice. And she was talking to the point where she started to become emotional and she was crying and she was talking about certain things that she was going through. And people are like, wow, like, I'm so happy that you shared your story with us. Like, we have so much empathy and compassion for you. And I felt the same, that I went straight to her Instagram page and I just gave a couple of likes and a couple of, nice comments just to show my support. And then after she had finished, you then went on the microphone and started to speak. And I think your opening line was, okay, before I get started, I don't want anybody to be showing any sympathy, or like, I've heard it all before. Like, what you're about to hear is going to be quite shocking. And I was thinking,
Uh-oh. Sounds like me.
is it going to be more than what this lady said? Because I don't know if anyone can top that. Not that it's a competition or anything, but when you started to speak, I was like, wow. And listening to your voice as well, you sound so casual about it. But before we get into that,
Now the audience are like, well, what did she say? What did
and
she say?
come on. Yeah, so before we get into that, what I'd like you to do, if you can, is just to introduce yourself and also to give us a little background about yourself. What is it you do?
So what I might do is my Clubhouse intro. So this is normally
Okay.
how I open the rooms when I'm moderating. I say, hey, my name is Marilyn Devonish. I've been a coach and therapist for the past 20 years. So I started in October 2000. I've also been coaching online since 2005. So that's 15 years before the pandemic pivot, when everyone was trying to do coaching and therapy online for the first time. The old normal is my new normal. I'm a multidisciplinary therapist, and I'm trained in about 20 different modalities, not because I couldn't decide. It's just that I realized that one size didn't fit all. And as clients were sitting in front of me, I wanted to have more flexibility. So decided that I would broaden my skills. When I started, I specialized in working with people with confidence and self-esteem issues, imposter syndrome, trauma, working with negative emotions, limiting beliefs. So things like anger, sadness, fear, guilt, anxiety, shame, and the I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy enough, I'm not capable enough. I was also a relationship coach for 9 years and used to write a magazine column for a magazine called Spirit and Destiny, did that for about 7 years. Was also a media specialist for Psychology's magazine. And one of the topics I really love speaking and teaching about is presentation and public speaking skills, because I
Mm.
was terrified of public speaking right up until the age of 32. And I could barely even speak to my own family. And I'm also a mental health first aid trainer, which means going into organizations, both in person and virtually, to train their staff to be mental health first aiders, which means first point of contact in terms of having these kinds of conversations. And yeah, for those of you on Clubhouse, my potted history is in my Clubhouse bio, so feel free to have a read. But that's me in a nutshell. And I also teach photo reading accelerated learning, so how to read at 25,000 words per minute, get through a whole book in 5 minutes. And the reason I stumbled into that is because I was also diagnosed with what was thought to be early onset Alzheimer's in my 20s, and my doctor had said there was nothing they could do for me. So I set up on a path to to kind of go, this cannot be how my life is going to be for the rest of my life. So that's me in a nutshell.
Wow. Wow. That's incredible. And that's not even everything. Like, because I remember, like, I was going through your profile and I was thinking, all right, so what experience have you had? Just to kind of think where I can gear the questions to make sure it's an area that I know you're going to be able to cover. And in your bio, you had a link which said resume. And I was like, do people still use resumes? But anyway, I thought, let me just have a look on that. And I was like, my God, like all this experience, you didn't even cover all of it.
I
That was
know.
just, that was a tiny portion. That was
I know.
the bite-sized chunk. I was that after I read all of that, and I was like, you know what? One of the things I have to ask is, because of all this experience, how old are you? Yeah, I was like, how do you manage to do all of this? How
Is she
old
like
is this?
100?
At least, at least.
Roger, I have to say, you are very thorough, because the resume, seriously, the resume started, I had to send something to a client and I was like, oh man, it's just going to look really dull if I just put it on a piece of paper. So I thought, let me just do a little document. 32 pages later, I'm like, okay, I'm just starting, and 32 pages I think is more than enough. We just have to leave it there. But it really started as I just need a quick way to summarize some of the things that I do, and it just got completely out of hand. But in answer to your question, I'm 52 as we sit here in real time, and I'll be 53 in May.
Wow. Wow. Definitely don't look it, as I'm sure you've heard that many times before. I mean, this isn't even anything to do with the stuff that we've gone through, but like, would you say that there's something which has helped you to maintain such great youth and energy to yourself?
The thing for me, absolutely yes. And
Mm.
I know it's 100 million% yes, because before I got into this line of work, I was really ill. And I had adrenal fatigue and all sorts of things. And I was needing to sleep 12 to 15 hours a day just to function and drag myself through the day. And I kid you not, there were times I was out to dinner with friends and I would fall asleep in the restaurant and do the nodding dog. That's how tired I always was. And in October 2000, I started learning about what they call the mind-body connection. And I was on a training course. I swear, to this day, I have no idea what happened in that 1 hour and 20-minute segment, because suddenly I started thinking, hold on a minute, if the mind and body are connected, and if we can impact the way we think and the way we feel, and the universe is infinite, because just read something called the holographic universe. I started thinking, well, hold on, I knew I was physically ill. I knew what was wrong, couldn't fix it, but I knew what was wrong. But I also started to think, am I contributing to that tiredness? Because you could say to me, Marilyn, do you want to go out on Friday night? And I'd be like, and it could be Monday. And I go, oh no, I can't, I'll be tired. And people go, okay. But then I'll be like, hold on a minute. How do I know on Monday that I'm going to be tired on Friday? I knew, because I've been like that for nearly 4 years. However, I thought, what if I'm also partly talking myself into it? So I sat in that room while they're all talking and doing whatever they're doing. And I came up with a process to start regenerating my energy and to change the way the energy moves through my body and to change my perception of myself and my energy. And the image I had in my head, I don't know, well, you're probably not old enough yourself, Roger, to know what I'm going to say next, but there was a thing called the Duracell bunny. And yeah, there used to be a TV advert where the Duracell bunny would play a drum, and the other bunnies who didn't have a Duracell battery would eventually just do this. And I just thought, I want to be like the Duracell bunny, where when I'm focused on what I'm doing and I'm enjoying it and I'm just alive, I can just keep going. I swear to you, I did it in that moment. It took about an hour and 10 minutes. A few days later, someone said to me, my God, you're like the Duracell bunny. And when she said it, I was like, did she just say what I think she said? And then the weekend after, because this was a 7-day training, like 15 hours a day, it was awful. Not awful, but in terms of time for somebody who was already fatigued. After I finished that training, the next day, I went out to do some grocery shopping, met a guy that I used to work with years ago. First thing he said is, my God, have you been on holiday? I was like, dude, I ain't slept for 7 days. So I'm like, people are now noticing my energy. That was 20 years ago. I'm still exactly the same. And a few days ago, somebody said, God, Marilyn, you're like the Duracell bunny. And I laughed. And I thought back to that day in October 2000. So no, I didn't do a Lady Gaga. I wasn't born this way, but managed to engineer it as such. And now I know it's not a fluke, because it's been 20 years.
Well, that's amazing, seriously. There's some people who do have that youthfulness inside them, and some people, I don't know if it's something to do with like being like old souls or young souls and that sort of thing. Do you believe in all of that? Like,
I definitely would say that I'm an old soul.
right.
Absolutely. I feel like, and when I was growing up, because I was very quiet and shy, lacking in confidence, and had very low self-esteem, number one, wasn't great at socializing, but number two, I don't know why, I was fascinated with the older people, the elders,
Yeah.
and would enjoy just listening to the elders. And so that was for me. So I always feel like, and there are sometimes things that I think when I was younger, I shouldn't know about that. I shouldn't know how to do that. I don't know if I should understand that concept, but I do. So it
Mm.
always felt as though I've been here. And I know for me, I do energy work. So I'm a fan of something called Huna, Huna. And I'm pretty certain that because I'm, how can I say that, running that through my system when I'm doing Huna with my clients, I actually think it impacts me. The reason I say this, you're going to realize very soon, Roger, that everything you say, I've got a story for it. Are we ready
Right.
for the blood pressure story?
Let's go for
So,
it.
so I go to my doctor now. I'd started doing these monthly Huna sessions where I would do. This is where it's going to get weird. I apologize to the audience. I've no idea what the demographic of this audience is. So I did these monthly things where I would do tarot, oracle card, and tarot readings and Huna energy clearings. I was doing it every single month. Been doing it for a year. I went to see my doctor, and my doctor wasn't there. It was a new guy. So we do the blood pressure, and he's got the form, and he went, and he looks at the numbers, and he went, and then he went, what? He went, wow. Now, when a doctor you've never seen before looks at you twice and does a double take and goes, wow, and sits back, you're like, oh dear, this can't be good news. And then I said, is everything all right? And he said, oh, and he's flustered. And now I'm like, just tell me what's going on. He said, it's very unusual for a woman of your age to have her blood pressure improving and getting better. And I was like, that's so weird. And I was thinking, what's been different in the last 12 months? My routine had been exactly the same. So I knew it wasn't that because I'd been doing ballet for, I think, 2 or 3 years at that point. And I thought the only thing that's been different between these two appointments is that I'm regularly doing the Huna energy clearings. And I really think that because that energy is running through my system and then going to my clients, I'm like, I must be benefiting from this as well. Because for that man to literally, he sat back, he went, what? And he sat back in his chair like shock. And I was like, what's going on? I'm like, it's got to be the energy work and the meditation. I
Wow.
really think that has, it's not all of it, but I think that has got a lot to do with it.
Wow. I've never heard of Huna, to be honest. Could you just give a little, I don't know, synopsis on Huna?
Huna is said to be about 35,000 years old. When I first went out to Hawaii to study, one of the first things that struck me is like, hold on a minute, this is personal development. I've heard all of the big name speakers talking about these concepts in a slightly different way. There's what I call the social media version, a very tiny portion, because people often say they haven't heard of Huna, but they've maybe heard of something called Ho'oponopono or the forgiveness process. There's a phrase that runs around social media. I'm sorry, I love you, please forgive me, thank you. That's what I call the quick and dirty version of Huna. That's not what I learned when I went out to Hawaii. Ho'oponopono in the version I learned is a big process where you got the stage and you got the avaiku and you've got the mana and you're cutting the arca connection. So it's a whole big thing rather than just words. But it's an ancient Hawaiian healing practice. It's about self-empowerment. So it works with the elements, it works with symbols. So anyone, let's say, who knows Reiki, it has symbols that you use, and it works with the higher self, and it is a way of cleaning up your energy, cutting old links and ties and connections, and being more in alignment, not just with yourself, but with the world around you. And it's my clients love it. I can send energy to a client in Australia. They have no idea what I'm even doing. I'll get an email going, Marilyn, did you send me some Huna today? And I'll be like, why'd you ask? And they'll be like, I felt it. I've had people who've listened to MP3 recordings 5 years after I recorded them. And I'm receiving emails going, oh, thank you so much for the teleseminar, the audio. When it was playing, I felt this and this. And the first time it happened, I'm reading, I'm like, I didn't do a webinar. So I emailed them back and said, thank you so much for your email. I'm really glad you enjoyed the MP3 recording. Can I just ask you, what were you listening to? She was listening to something that I recorded 5 years ago and still having exactly the same the same experience. And so Huna is one of my client favorites because it's so quick, it will transcend boundaries, and it will impact people. I can be in a room of 550 people, I can do 2 or 3 minutes of Huna. Every single person gets something different, and they will spend copious amounts of time telling me what they've experienced, and every person got something different. The thing that was consistent when I did it for the first time at an event with that many people, I started with, let's say, the water symbol. People had no idea. All they knew, there was a woman on stage going, that doesn't mean anything to anyone, even another Huna practitioner, because we all use our breath differently. People saying, well, when you started, I always felt like I was under a waterfall. And then I used a fire symbol. And then they said, and then I felt really hot, as though like there was a fire. Seriously. And this went on every single time for 4 days. I was hearing the same description from people. So they had no idea what was going on, but they felt it. And were able to put it into words, and some of them had physical things that were going on, like migraine just disappeared, lethargy disappeared, backache disappeared, confusion disappeared. It was crazy cool. And I know it's crazy cool, but that was the first time I've done it with like over 500 people. But my clients who have been with me for 20 years, they know the score. But Huna is one of my favorite energy clearing processes. See, and I can talk for England, Roger. I think we need to get that clear as well.
Okay, so, that's all good, all good. It sounds like something I'll definitely want to do myself. So you went to Hawaii to do that, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then there are, you know, I do like an intro workshop, and one of the organizations I trained with, they're thinking of doing some stuff in the UK, but the experience out in Hawaii was just amazing.
Right. So you're also a psychotherapist. No, you're also a therapist, right?
And hypnotherapist.
And oh, yes. I'm going to come to that in a moment. Is there a difference between a therapist and a psychotherapist?
Yeah, for me, what I would say was, I think all therapy is absolutely valuable. I know when I started out, psychotherapy was one of those things that people were doing for many years, you know, as they're unpeeling and working through the layers, a bit like counseling as well. People would see it, maybe be with their counselor for many years. And when I started doing this line of work, I was working with people sometimes for just one day. And we'd start at 10 o'clock in the morning, we'd work through the day, finish at 4 or 5, bye, have a nice life. Their life is completely transformed. Wow. So it was just a very different way of working. And there's absolutely value in the, you know, talking approach. And when I first got into this line of work, I often say to people, I went from suicidal to Samaritan, because I contemplated suicide in September 2000, and the following year became a Samaritan's volunteer, where I'm answering the phone, you know, speaking to people who are having their own challenges. So I just, for me, it's just a very different way of working. Yeah, we talk a little bit, but really we're just there to sort this thing out. So
yeah. So what is the main differences between them both, would you say? The therapist and the psychotherapist?
I would say from my perspective, I would say the way that I'm working is probably a bit more dynamic and a bit more practical, in terms of I don't just want to hear about the story and unravel it through conversation or reflection. I'm actually saying, right, I hear the story, let's resolve it. Let's work on this, let's change this, and let's do something to change it. So the client doesn't have to do all of the heavy lifting in terms of trying to figure it out and reason it out, and oh my gosh, and then there was this and then was that. It's like, okay, we got the story, let's go forth and resolve this. But they're going to have similar outcomes. But for me, having gone through both, when I was doing just what I call the talking therapy, I was just talk, and it is therapeutic to talk. I've written many blogs saying it's good to talk. Here's the number for the Samaritans. So I've been banging on about that for the past 20 years. And for me, it's just a different way of working. And people often come to see me when they feel like they've tried everything else, and they can describe the problem back and forth, left and right, inside out and center, and they still haven't resolved it. And now they're in a place saying, can I just resolve this, please? I just want to resolve it and move on with the rest of my life. And that's where some of the other tools and the other modalities will come into it.
Yeah, I mean, you've got like so many dynamic stuff. It's incredible. Like, how can I put it? It's like the difference between, well, not directly the same, but you got someone who might be a personal trainer, but then you might have someone who is a nutritionist and a functional medicine practitioner. So they've got more dynamics in what they can offer for a larger holistic approach as opposed to someone who just teaches someone how to train. That makes sense. That was probably a rubbish analogy,
No,
but
absolutely. It is. That's a
yeah.
great analogy, because it is a bit like that, because there'll be times where you might speak to someone who can hear what you're saying and listen to it and empathize with it and hold the space, but they may not necessarily have the tools to then do something about it. You know, where I can hear what you're saying and I can empathize with you, and then once we've done that, we could do something about it. So yes, absolutely. And for me, you're right, the holistic thing has always been really important in terms of working with, and there's an event I've been running for 10 years called the MBS Energy Fest, Mind, Body, Spirit and Soul, because I'm like, we're a whole unit. You know, yes, we got, but people often work on this bit. But now, what about, you know, in the bodybuilding world and the weightlifting world and the exercising world, you know, they probably know the joke about they forgot to do leg day. So they're like this and they're bulked out at top, and then you look at the legs and they've got spindly little legs. If you really want to do a whole body thing, you need to do leg day and arm day and abs and all the rest of it. You can't just, well, you can, but you probably don't want to just work on the one thing. And for me, that's always the way that I've seen my work as well, is I want to be able to be more holistic and do something from the inside out, which is going to make a massive change and transformation in someone's life.
That's exciting. So exciting. What other thing did I read that you do? Something about a photo reader. You're a certified photo reader? I read that. I was like,
you're like, she's just making this up now. She's just making this up.
What title can I create? I've never heard of that. So please,
okay,
what is
just so you know it's real. I was doing a talk about this yesterday. So just so you can see it's real, these are the photo reading books. So it's a thing, it's trademarked and all the rest of it. Photo reading's been about since 1985. And the way I describe it to my clients is, if you want to at least, this is a real book, if you want to at least half your reading speed, then photo reading is the way to do it. So the premise of photo reading is how to read at 25,000 words per minute. The average reading speed is, I don't know, 400 to 600 words a minute if you're really fast.
I do about 250.
Well, no, but the average reader is, you know, anywhere from 200 to 300 thereabouts. If somebody's, let's say, a speed reader, they might be doing 400 or 500 words a minute. So we're starting with 25,000 words per minute and showing people how they can photo read a whole book from start to finish in about 5 minutes. And then you're learning strategies for you to be able to remember and recall what it is you've actually read. And this book was, I was talking to a client about it yesterday. There was in the town I live in, when we're not in lockdown, we have something called the Imagine Festival, and there was a strong woman there. So, you know, she's doing the thing where she had a metal bar on her shoulders and a man sitting on a swing on either side, and she's just walking around like this.
Wow.
And one of her acts is to rip a book in half. So after she'd finished, she's just packing up. I picked this up and I said, "Excuse me, is there any way I can just buy a couple of your props?" So she went, "Oh no, just have it. I was going to throw it away anyway." So she actually ripped this book in half. And I just thought it's a brilliant representation of photo reading. If you want to at least half your reading speed, double your reading speed, then photo reading is a really fantastic way to do it. And I only came across it because of the early onset Alzheimer's stuff. But when I did read all the stuff about 25,000 words per minute, a whole book in 5 minutes, double, treble your reading speed, get more done in less time, do it with ease and relaxation. I was like, oh, no, this has got to be, no, this can't work. And so I bought the tapes and I just kept them for 2 years because I just couldn't believe it could be possible. And I bought them in 1998. In the year 2000, I was on a training course, and the guy who was running it, somebody said, how do you remember all this stuff? Names, dates, facts, figures, all the data. And he said, "Oh, I read 20 to 30 books a month." I'm like, "Dude, you obviously don't get out much. I don't read that in a year." And then somebody said, "How do you do it?" And so he pointed, there was a resource table at the back of the room where they had products for sale. And he pointed to these tapes that I have right here. And he said, "I photo read." And I was like, oh my gosh, I've got those sitting on the shelf at home. It sounded too fantastic to be true. So I just left it there gathering dust. And that's where I coined the phrase shelf development, where my bookshelf was more developed than me because I wasn't reading and using any of the data that was sitting there gathering dust. So I was like, you know what? I've seen it in action now. Let me go back, and rather than being, I know this and I know that and I know how to read and I know how to study and you can't tell me anything, I was like, let me just put all of that to one side, go into it with an open mind, do what the man on the tape in those days is asking me to do, and see what happens. And the rest was like freaking magic. I'm not kidding you. It
How long?
blew my mind.
How long did it take for you to start grasping the concept and really seeing some significant changes? And also, what reading speed did you start with? And yeah, where did you max out?
The reading speed I started with was almost zero.
Okay.
Because at that time I was studying to be a chartered accountant, and things had gotten so bad with my mind and my memory that I was reading the same chapters 10, 15, 20 times, had no idea what I'd read. And I'd be sitting in the ACCA exams, and I'd be scoring like 28%. Now I'm a woman who, when I did my degree, I was 1.3%, I think it was 1.7% away from getting a first class. And I was working full time while doing a full time degree. When all of the stuff came with what was thought to be early onset Alzheimer's, all of that went out the window. And literally, you could say something to me, if I didn't write it down straight away, gone. And I was working at the time. And so I had what I called a sunflower desk, where somebody would say something, I would grab my pen and a Post-it note, write it down, and it goes on. So eventually my desk looks like a sunflower. There's just Post-it notes everywhere. If one ever got lost, I was done for, because I'd have no idea what I was meant to be doing. That then turned into a list. So I was very efficient. And the running joke was, where am I on Marilyn's list? The reason I had to become like that, couldn't remember. I could meet you in the corridor and say, oh, hey, Marilyn, can you set up a meeting with the Asia Pacific team? Yeah, no problem. Get back to my desk and go, oh, God, what did they ask me to do? Gone. So now I have to sit there in fear. A few days later, they say, did you set up the meeting with the Asia Pacific team? Oh, I've just got one more person I need to hear from. Now I've got to scramble and do the thing I should have done. And eventually I went to see my doctor and I explained what was going on. And he said, everything you're telling me, it presents like early onset Alzheimer's. He said, unfortunately, there's nothing I can do for you. The most I can do is I can give you a medical certificate, which I can send on your behalf to the ACCA to see if they can give you extra time in your exams. So when I rocked up to do my personal development training, I had a medical certificate for my memory. And we had a test that we had to do. Now I had 2.5 months to do this test. Open book. You read the question, you listen to the tapes, because there's learning by tapes, you read the book and you just write the answer. Couldn't do it, couldn't get my head around it. So when I went to do the training in October 2000, I handed in my test, and apparently behind the scenes, they're like, who is this Marilyn Devonish? She must be lazy or stupid, because it was one of the worst tests they'd seen. And I went into the training with no intention of completing it. I only went to get a refund. Long story. Signed up, didn't realize I signed up for some new age hocus pocus, as my friends used to call it. So I tried to get a refund. They wouldn't give me a refund, but said, come to the training. If you don't get massive value, give you a refund at the end, blah, blah, blah. So now I'm angry, as well as, having to waste my time on this test that I couldn't do. By the end of the training, I'd loved it. So I decided that 3 weeks later, I was going to go back and do the master practitioner. However, I'm now back to my accountancy studies and I'm already busy, and the test is humongous. It's massive compared to the practitioner test. So now I'm like, okay, I've seen this guy saying that he photo reads 20 to 30 books a month. I've got the tapes on my shelf. I haven't got time to do the test. Let me just photo read. So I just spent the first day and a half just going through the tapes, doing everything I was told. And then I did the test in that state. There was like 65, 70 people on that training. And my goal, I put a goal in my timeline, because now I'm getting into the esoterics, put a goal in my timeline that my test is going to be perfect. No corrections, just well done, good job. Handed the test in, it takes them a week to mark them because they're so massive. Every single person in the room had corrections except for one person. Who do you think the one person is who had no corrections? Have a guess.
Was it you?
That will be me. And so now I go from worst test to best test in 3 weeks. And then the following year, in May 2001, I became a trainer of NLP. And NLP trainers training is a juggernaut. 3 weeks. One of those days includes a 8-hour closed book exam condition day, where you're just powering through one exam paper after the other. I decided I wasn't going to revise. I'm just going to photo read. And I put a goal in my timeline that I'll be finished in 3 hours. I was finished in 3 hours on the money. And apparently they were like, so it went from, who's Marilyn Devonish? She must be lazy or stupid, to who is Marilyn Devonish and did she cheat? Because it looked like I'd copied the textbook, and I was finished. There were still people writing at 6 o'clock. I was at home with my feet up watching Columbo. And so they were, so they were, I'm a fan of Columbo, long story. But seriously, there were so many of those instances, but initially it just took me a week or so to get my head around it. And when I run a workshop, it's 2.5 days. Clients come in one and going, what is this thing? By the Friday, they're like, my mind is blown. Why didn't you tell me it was this good before? And by the Sunday, they're like, whoa. And it's like the movie Limitless.
Yeah.
If you've ever seen it with Bradley Cooper, it's a bit like that.
I love that movie. Anything like that sort, like just watching that when I see the guy take the tablet and all of a sudden, was it NZ? I can't remember what it was. NZT. Wow. Yeah. Wow. I've always been looking for that. Have you tried nootropics?
No, but the reason I mentioned Limitless, number one, I love the movie. I watched it a couple of days ago again, but the reason I mentioned that is I had a doctor and he was a medical doctor and he was training to be a neurosurgeon. He came to my photo reading workshop, and on the Friday night, because we do 4 hours on the Friday, then a Saturday and Sunday. On the Friday, he came up to me and he said, have you seen the movie Limitless? And at that point, I'd never seen it. This was about 6 years ago. I said, no, why? He said, everything that's in the movie, you're teaching us how to do it here in real life without having to take a dangerous silver pill. He said, the only thing you're not doing is time shifting. Now, I didn't know what he meant about the time shifting. I was like, oh, okay. On the Sunday afternoon, he comes back and he says, I take that back. I says, what do you mean, Dr. Koss? And he said, we are time shifting because I cannot believe how much we've done, how much we've covered, how much people have learned in such a short space of time. And so for the following year after that, every single Sunday without fail, the only time we wouldn't speak is if Dr. Koss was doing a neurosurgeon exam or if I was running my photo reading workshop. But every single Sunday we said an hour, it was like 3 or 4 hours, but we'd speak every Sunday about talk about what I'm doing from the neuroscience perspective and explaining how it works from the esoteric perspective. And after that year, I was like, Dr. Koss, we've got so much information here, we should run a workshop. So I hired a cinema in London, a lovely place called the One Aldwych. I got in touch with the film company because you can't just hire a cinema and show a Hollywood movie just because you fancy it. So I got in touch with the film company. I laid out what I wanted to do, why I was doing it, what we were going to be doing. And I applied for a license to be able to show Limitless in a private cinema for money. And so Dr. Koss came along and talked about the neuroscience side and I talked about the personal development side, and we showed how they fit together. And in the middle of the workshop, we showed the movie Limitless. But the reason I always mention it, because Dr. Koss was like, you're doing everything in the movie. And I then ran out and purchased a copy myself the day after the photo reading. And I was straight on the phone like, Dr. Koss, we need to talk. Because it was just that. It was just like, whoa.
That's incredible. That's incredible. I mean, wow. You're doing so many amazing things. And it's, it stems from lots of experience that you've had over the years and all the courses and different things that you've done. But it hasn't always been that way. So taking it back to the very beginning where we spoke at the very start of this podcast.
Back to Clubhouse.
Yeah, back to Clubhouse. We're going to actually take it even further back to...
way back into time.
Yeah, exactly. So your upbringing wasn't the greatest. Could you take us through some of the experience that you went through, which wasn't so glamorous, and what you had gone through and what you learned from it?
So for those of you who've been here since the beginning, thank you for watching. And we're going back to the Clubhouse room that Roger was in that said, when you spoke, whoa. So what I most likely said in terms of offering the trigger warning, because if I just blurt it out, people are then like, oh my God. So I always have to preface it with saying, relax everyone, it's cool. I'm not the least bit triggered by it. I'm all good, it's fine. And that's why I can be quite casual about the way I say it. So I most likely said, hey, in terms of experiences in childhood, I did have a challenging childhood, and I was sexually abused from the age of 7 to 17. And I say that not so people can go, oh, you poor thing, just so they can know that it is possible to have that kind of experience and come out the other side. And let's be clear, I didn't just come out the other side. I had the first 32 years of my life culminated in September 2000, I contemplated suicide, and I actually sat and worked out all of the ways I could potentially do it. And some of them I ruled out, and others I was like, you're on the possibility list. And that would have been, now I thought that the tipping point was because a partner had had an affair. That felt like the catalyst. But when I got into personal development and really started to look at this for the first time, I'm like, that probably had nothing to do with it. It was all of the abuse from all of those years and the way that I'd suppressed it and put a lid on it and tried to put it behind me, put it out of my mind. So when I hear people saying, oh yeah, I've put it behind me, but you could tell in their voice, it's like, it's behind you. And it's just waiting to go pow. That's what my life was like. And one of the reasons then, I'm natural. Okay, when I say this, people who know me, they just burst out laughing. I'm off the chart introvert in terms of MBTI, the Myers-Briggs type indicator. I still am. So when you add being introverted to trauma and abuse, that's not a good combination. So now, because I don't want anyone to know anything about me and what's happened to me, I now have to start putting up a barrier and a wall to keep people away. And I remember at one point, my older sister calling me snooty and stuck up, because that's the way I would have appeared, because I didn't want anyone anywhere near me, because if they got near me, they would be able to see how damaged and traumatized and broken I was. And anyone who's been through that kind of abuse, guilt and shame is really common. You feel guilty sometimes. Now, as a 7-year-old, you don't really know what's going on. You're the special one, it's the game, whatever. By the time you start getting into your 14, 15, you definitely are aware that this isn't right. But what are you going to do about it? So now there's a sense of guilt that you're not doing something about it, and massive amounts of shame that is associated with that. And so to make sure that no one could ever find out and have any idea, the walls and the barriers have to go up. So now I'm already quiet and shy and introverted. I've now got to take another step back again to make sure that no one can get close enough to me to find out what's really going on in my life. And I carried that until I was 32 years old. And I would have genuinely said to you, there's nothing I can do about that. That's who I am. That's my personality. That's my past. I can't change that. And I truly believe that, because I didn't, no, that's not true. My brain is like, don't lie. I got an inkling, because I used to watch Oprah, the Oprah Winfrey Show.
Yeah.
And I used to sit at home and I would pray, bit of fluff. I would sit at home and I would think, I wish I could be in the audience. I wish I could be in the audience. I wish I could be in the audience, so that one of the specialists on the stage could help me and could say, because you see these people going up on stage, the therapist or whatever would say like a few words and they'd be like, oh my God,
Yeah.
and I'm like, I want that, I want that. So now it's gone from, I wish I could be in the audience, to Oprah, let me be on that stage, because I can be the person who says a few words and has a transformational conversation. People are like, oh my God. So it's a complete flip, but that gave me an inkling that people out there were trying at least to resolve these issues. But I still didn't think it was possible for me. But I knew there were people in America who were doing these things. And weirdly, one of the women I sat and watched on that stage is a woman called Marianne Williamson. I'm interviewing Marianne Williamson this weekend. So that's going to be one of those full circle moments where I now sit in, well, of course it's on Zoom, but I'm going to sit next to Marianne Williamson and have an hour and a half where it's just me and her doing an interview and taking questions from the audience. And that's almost one of those full circle moments, because I sat in the 1980s stroke early 90s watching Marianne Williamson spinning some prayer vibes onto people and wishing that I could receive a little bit of that. So yeah, when I say people, I had a slightly challenging, and the reason I say sexual abuse, if I say abuse, people kind of think maybe I've got a clip around the ear.
Yeah.
So I just have to make it absolutely clear what we're talking about. And one of the most common reactions I get from people is, I never have guessed. And I'm saying, that's exactly my point.
Yeah.
That it is possible to go through something like that and not have it mar and degrade and color and ruin your entire life. You can still come out the other side and live a life that is full of joy and happiness and excitement, and actually be fine to do. And that's what I say to people in terms of, how do you know something is healed? How do you know you're over it? You can talk about it just as easily as I might say, do you know what, Roger, I fancy a cup of green tea. I could say, oh yeah, I was sexually abused from the age of 17. And I don't say it to be blasé in that way, to dismiss it. It's serious stuff. I say it in that way because there's no energy and no charge to it. And I want people to know you can go through that and it doesn't have to ruin your entire life. Because when it does, that means the person, the perpetrator of that, they've won. Even when they're not there, they're still ruling your life. And I'm like, no, when I realized it was possible to change and transform, I was like, I can't have that. I will not have that. This person's already had 32 years of my life.
Yeah.
You're not having any more. No.
So what did you do? Like, what is some of the process for the healing for you? I mean, look at you now, super powerful woman, helping the world, doing some incredible stuff. But what was the healing process? What was the initial step to heal yourself?
Do you know, it's a little bit like what people might say with AA. The first step was to admit there was a problem. Houston, we have a problem. Because if you met the old Marilyn, I'll be like, I'm fine. How fine? You know, everything was fine. So it was like, no. And the reason why I was so resistant, because I didn't believe it was possible. When I signed up for the training, I thought I'd signed up for a communication skills course, because one of the reasons I chose to be an accountant or decided to study accountancy was that I thought I wouldn't have to talk to people. I could just punch numbers and push papers in the background. Oh, no. To be a slightly decent accountant, you've got to be able to talk to your clients. I'm like, oh, crap. So now I'm like, this isn't going to work, because I really would have wanted to be a lawyer. That's what I truly would have loved to have done. But my older sister was a lawyer. And now, there was nothing to do with my older sister, I made a comparison in my mind. She's so bright and clever. I'm not as bright as her. So now if I study exactly the same thing, I put myself in the arena where people can directly compare us. Whereas previously, they couldn't make a direct comparison. If I now follow the same profession, bang, it's going to be right there. Well, Jackie got an A, Marilyn got a C. And I'm like, oh, no, can't do that. And you have to have a voice. So much as I'd watched Ally McBeal and thought I was an expert, I knew I couldn't spin the vibes like Ally McBeal. So I decided accountancy would be the safest route. So now I have to up my communication skills game. So sign up for what I thought was a communication skills course, which was the NLP. And then when the joining instructions and all the books and the tapes back in those days arrived, I'm like, what's this? NLP, hypnosis, timeline therapy, HUNA. This isn't what I signed up for. So I was straight on the phone. There's been a mistake. I need my money back, because it was several £1,000s. So that's how it came to be. And those are the very processes that I used to resolve this. So in my case, you know, it took a couple of weeks, because I'm learning the processes as well as being the client. Because the way that you teach the training, you do the theory, you go off and work in groups of 2 or 3, and everyone has the chance to be the practitioner, and everyone has a chance to be the client. And you often have an observer who can give feedback. So I was going through it in bite-sized pieces, and it culminated in this thing that we call the breakthrough session, which is just one day. And so that's why when I qualified, for the first 9 years I was in practice, I just did the breakthrough sessions mainly face-to-face in one day. But that partly changed in 2005 when a client phoned up. She said, I've just read your article in Psychology's magazine, absolutely loved it. I want to book a one-day breakthrough session. I'm like, no problem, cool, fine. She said, I'm in Birmingham. I went, oh, brilliant. There's a straight train from Birmingham to, you know, where I live. And there was a moment of silence, and she said, Birmingham, Alabama. I was like, oh. Now I knew she had an American accent, but London is really eclectic. So it didn't occur to me. And so I said to her, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're not going to do 8 hours on the phone. That's too much in one sitting. And we didn't have all Skype, and I didn't have a webinar room and an online coaching room back then. So I said, we're going to break it down into blocks of 2 hours, pay for the breakthrough session. However, even if you're happy with it, if I'm not happy with the way it's gone, I'll give you a full refund, no questions asked. To this day, one of the best breakthrough sessions I've ever done. And so the thing that worked for me, which was the combination of the NLP, hypnosis, timeline therapy, and nowadays, because I'm trained in HUNA, there's a big dose of HUNA. That is how it happened.
Ooh, that sounds amazing.
It is amazing.
Oh, I feel like I need to book something. So let's say someone comes to you with a childhood trauma. You know, a lady has been, as let's say, for instance, there was a lady, she had witnessed her father being abusive to her mother on a regular basis. When she's a young girl, she's seeing all of this happen. And then she grows up and she finds herself being attracted to guys that are just going to abuse her all the time, you know, take advantage. What would you do? What would you say is the main reason for that? Why she's been attracted to this kind of relationship and why she keeps having those relationships as well, not just the one, many of them. And what would your procedure be to get her out of it?
Oh man, Roger, I love your brain. Seriously, these are some good questions. And the question you've asked, there's of course a story. When I was doing the NLP training, there's a guy called Richard Bandler who was one of the co-creators of NLP, Neuro Linguistic Programming. And I was told a story of an event that he did. Now, he did it as an experiment. So I had a room full of people. But within that room, there was one woman who had been abused, as you're describing. And there was one man who was a wife beater and abuser. And he was studying who would pair up and potentially leave together. Those two people in amongst the room full of people found each other and left together. It's a bit like bullying. Bullies don't pick on the person who is out there and confident, boom, 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 because automatically you're like, that vibe is not one that's going to gel with what I want to do. And a bit like that, we see this in the animal kingdom. Often the weakest are at the back of the pack. So that if there's an attack, someone gets left behind and the strongest lead the charge to move the others to safety. Now, when we'll put a strong member at the back to hold up the rear, it's the same in the human kingdom. And the animal that's going to be the prey and the animal that's going to be the predator will be able to immediately scan and go, you. Seriously. There is, right. And we pick up patterns. And from that perspective, and I'm just going to talk for myself now, the patterns and the limiting beliefs that I carried right up until the age of 32, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy enough, I'm not capable enough. What I'm about to say, no offense to my previous partners, but I didn't necessarily choose my partners, they chose me, because I didn't think I was good enough. So even if there's somebody I really have my eye on, I'd be like, oh no, they're not going to be interested in me. And people therefore are running these patterns. Somebody can see those vulnerabilities. Thankfully, I have no idea how it happened. Thankfully, all of my previous partners, absolutely amazing human beings. And with the exception of one, I'm friends with all of them. And if I needed anything or they needed anything, we all know we can pick up the phone. I'll be right there. They will be right there. So I was lucky enough to attract incredible people and incredible men into my life. Not everyone is that lucky, because somebody will be able to spot those vulnerabilities. Number one, they will prey on them and wear down your confidence. So you now think that you're, number one, you're lucky to have them. Number two, no one else would want you. And number three, you're so flawed, you better be happy to keep what you've got. And that's the way that horrible dynamic tends to work. And when people have grown up with a particular thing, you can just see the pattern. People often say, I don't want to be like XYZ, but then that's the thing they're attracted to, because so much energy goes into that. It just starts taking on a life of its own. And it is so common. I can't even begin to tell you. So common.
That's really interesting. Really interesting. Especially as you were saying about, like, you know, you got the one who's being abused, the abuser, and somehow they just gravitate to each other. Like their energies kind of, you know, like I don't know, you got the positive and negative part of like of the magnet kind of pulling each other.
It is like the yin and the yang, where those two dynamics will fit together.
Kind of fit together, isn't it? It's like, you abuse, I like being abused. I don't know why, but hey, let's make it happen.
And sometimes people don't know any different. If that's what you've grown up with, that's just kind of almost the norm in a way. And one of the things I know to be true, because I sit with some of them, the people who, particularly if we're looking at women, and men are abused as well, there's a whole, you know, we're starting to see more helplines to help men in that area as well. it's often people who on the outside are very confident, competent, capable. They're often holding down really serious jobs, have a lot of responsibility, but there's an area of their life which isn't quite that. So it's not even, you can tell by looking. And now the similar sort of thing creeps in, the guilt and the shame. Why am I letting this happen? Oh my gosh, I can't tell anyone because people are embarrassed.
Yeah.
So now it all just becomes a secret that happens behind closed doors.
That's really interesting. Yeah. Yeah. I guess they just keep covering it up with something, don't want to admit to it, which was one of the things that really helped you to get out of your situation. First of all, admitting it to yourself and then being able to work from there. Can any person be hypnotized? I heard you mention that you do hypnotherapy, and I've watched some, some hypno stuff on TV, and I thought, come on, that looks so fake. And I don't know if it's all dramatized, if it's all, reconstructed and, good actors and stuff. But what I do want to know is, can any person be hypnotized? And if not, what is it that they have to have going on for them to be able to get this kind of treatment?
I'm going to say on one level, yes. Now, when I started out, as you can imagine, 20 years ago, it wasn't as common as it is now. And people come and go, oh, hypnotherapist, but you can't hypnotize me. And I go, yeah, you're right, I can't. And then I just move on. And they're like, but I'm like, you've already told me I can't hypnotize you. We don't need to have this conversation. Because I already know there's going to be a degree of resistance. The reason I say on some level, yes, is that we are being hypnotized every single day. Right. Billboards, magazines, what we're listening to, the things that people say to us, give it here, you're so clumsy, you'll never amount to anything. All of that is a form of hypnosis. We also know how powerful our, what you might call subliminal unconscious mind is. Because I don't know if you remember, and this would have been, gosh, we're probably pushing back, 10 years or so now, when product placement was first introduced onto UK television screens. Before the program started, so something like X Factor would say, this program has product placement. Why? They're telling you that there's going to be some products that are in front of you that might influence the way you think. Then they didn't say it anymore. But what would happen is before it was allowed, like let's say Simon Cowell would have a PC on his desk, they would blur out the logo. We all knew what it was. And then there'll be a bottle of something, on the table. They would blur out the logo because they knew that if we kept seeing that repeatedly, it's going to influence us. Why do you think organizations will pay millions of dollars to appear in a James Bond movie where their watch does this across the screen, like for 10 seconds? Why? Because in that 10 seconds that watch goes across the screen while James Bond is, landing one, we see that. We're influenced by that. Why do you think people are dropping millions of dollars to advertise for 30 seconds in the Super Bowl? Because we're influenced by that. So I'm saying using the word influence on purpose, but influence and hypnosis have some relationship to each other because we are seeing something or hearing something that impacts our mind and the way we think and the decisions we might then go on to make. You're not going to drop millions of dollars for a Super Bowl ad if it doesn't work. It works. So that's why I say on some level. Now, coming back to what you were talking about with the stage hypnosis, if you ever are at one of those shows, and it's one of the things you learn when you become a hypnotherapist, you do a suggestibility test, and you're going to get people to do a series of things. So you might say, raise your right hand. If somebody raises their left hand, you're not going to choose them. Because they can't follow instructions. Or if you say to somebody, stand up straight, and they kind of half hunch, you're not going to choose them because they can't follow instructions. No, they can't. They're choosing not to follow your instructions. So by the time they've done that process of elimination, the people who make it onto the stage are the most suggestible in terms of what they are willing to do. So they are going to be the ones who have fun. Now, yes, what you see when and suddenly you're in a car talking Japanese, and then somebody will, open their eyes and da 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 da. Yeah. There's a part of their brain that is doing that, and sometimes they actually don't remember. But in terms of the thing I always say about it, look, and that's why I'm not anti-stage hypnosis. It's fun. we seem to have a mechanism in our brain that will stop us if something goes against our values and our beliefs. Now, in the times of the Cold War, trust me, they tried to create human assassins who could, at the sound of my voice, go and do da 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 da. People just, they get to a point and like, oh, what we're doing. And so we've seen all of those experiments and how they've played out. Don't get me wrong, there are people who would do it, but on the whole, we have what I call a morality check, which is going to go, hold on a minute, this isn't right for me. And if it's not, so, well, the last holiday I had in January of last year, before Corona was even a thing, we were on one of these resorts, and one of the acts of the night was a stage hypnosis, doing exactly what you're talking about. I didn't volunteer because I didn't want to do it.
Right.
I didn't want to do it. Do you know what I mean? So now I'm not a good choice because I don't want to do it. Could I have done it? Yeah, of course I could. Did I want to? No. I'm just chilling with my mocktail watching the show. So there's an element of suggestibility. You're going to choose the people who are going to follow your instructions and really allow themselves to go deeply in it. And there are different layers and levels of hypnosis. But on the face of it, I would say that all of us are susceptible to these things because that's who we are as human beings. Anyone choose to be able to sit in a, because when I first tried to do hypnosis probably 25 years ago, when I thought, oh gosh, I've heard about it for confidence, let me give it a go, it didn't really work because I was sat on the man's sofa and he's saying, and you're now on a beach. I'm thinking, no, not dude, I'm on your sofa in South London. So I just couldn't allow myself to go there. And he's doing all these wonderful descriptions and I was just like, I can't, no, I'm not, what am I meant to be doing? This is wrong, it's not working. So I just put the barriers up myself. And it wasn't until years later, I'm like, oh, I understand it now. Number one, I will use different ways to get into my clients' minds with their permission, because not everybody is going to be able to visualize being on a beach and feeling their feet on the sand. But there are other things that I could say. And what I used to really laugh about all my life with my really analytical clients, we're getting towards the end of the breakthrough session. They say, so Marilyn, or we're doing a segment, and they go, so Marilyn, are we going to do any hypnosis today? And I said, oh, we'll do it next time. I've been hypnotizing them since the minute they walked through the door. They didn't notice, but I didn't want them to notice because they would get in my way.
Yeah, create resistance.
And let me just be clear, for anyone who meets me socially, people say, oh my God, you're a hypnotherapist. I'm like, don't worry, I'm not gonna be doing it if you're not paying me. And this is a social event, so you can relax. Because it's an ethical thing. You're not just going to go and start messing with people's head just because you can. Just like a dentist or a doctor wouldn't, at an evening dinner party, whip out their scalpel or their, cleansing rod. It's the same way. I wouldn't do that either, because that now is unethical to be working with someone. And again, I can be sitting somewhere very quietly. People around me are talking, and I think, well, I could help you with that. I'm not going to say that. I just mind my own business. You're not talking to me. I'm just listening, going, oh, that's interesting. The reason I will speak on Clubhouse is because that's what the conversation is about. But I wouldn't just barge in and go, oh, yeah, I can help you with that.
Yeah. Let me ask, can a person hypnotize themselves?
Yes.
They can. Oh, man. That I need to learn. Not to say that I've got some major issues or whatever, but if there was something where I felt, hey man, I want to be able to make sure that I do this type of task, then I would love to be able to hypnotize.
You don't have to have major issues. When I first started, it's kind of gone on a scale now. When I first started, I was attracting people who had similar issues to me.
Yeah. And
we're resolving those. Over the years, it's kind of transitioned now to people who want to next level their skills. So they're not coming and going, oh, I got this problem. It's like, we want a next level. Let's do this thing. And for me, one of the ways that I used a form of hypnosis and something called anchoring, when I first became a public speaker, I remember the day vividly. I was at Kensington Olympia, going to speak in front of thousands of people for a magazine called Here's Health. Unfortunately, it doesn't exist anymore. It was brilliant. And we're chatting away to what you call the runner. And she says, anyway, we need to get you mic'd up now. Just go and get the mic pack. At that moment, I just felt panic. I was like, oh my God, the microphone. So while she's gone, I'm like, hold on a minute, Miss Devonish. If this is going to be one of the things you do for your work and your career, because I wanted to do live TV and live radio, etc., I'm like, we need to calm down, because I realized I was negatively anchored to the microphone, that they clip on, the thing they clip on, the pack. I realized I was negatively anchored to that. I'm like, whoa, this can't work. So while she's away getting the mic, I'm standing there like, okay, and I'm doing a little form of mini hypnosis, and I'm anchoring myself into when somebody says, are you ready? Or says, let's get you mic'd up. I'm like, let's do this thing. Born ready. So that was then the new mantra, etc., that I gave myself, ran a little process to install that into my mind. By the time she came back, she said, are you ready? I went, born ready. She put the thing on, and that's where rather than the fear and the panic, it was excitement. So now if anybody that I want to work with says, are you free to do this? My first thought is like, oh, I hope I'm free, rather than, oh my God. So, it was a form of little mini hypnosis. I'm like, I can't have that, because if I'm going to be terrified every single time the microphone comes towards me, number one, it's going to be a painful career, or I just won't be able to do it.
Yeah. That's interesting. That is interesting. I think a lot of people, without realizing, do a lot of anchoring. They anchor themselves in so many ways that, as you just said, like you've created a new anchor. And I think that's what you learn from NLP as well, isn't it?
Absolutely.
As a master practitioner. That's cool. That's cool. Have you ever worked with shamans before?
I know a few.
You know a
I
few.
haven't done the ayahuasca and all that.
No.
Actually, I was in a clubhouse room the other night, and they were talking about enlightenment and spiritual evolution. The whole room was about the use of psychedelics, and somebody very meekly said, is it possible to transform without the use of psychedelics and drugs? And, it's almost apologetic. But when I was listening, I was thinking what he was thinking, because I was in the audience. It's one where they were only bringing up the people that they knew.
Yeah.
But I was thinking, I've had pretty much all of the experiences they're talking about. I just haven't used any psychedelics and drugs. So, and don't get me wrong, I've heard some amazing things about the ayahuasca ceremony. I'm kind of curious. I'm like, oh, I don't know if I want to be in the jungle for a week trekking, but apart from that, sounds cool. I don't like bugs. This, just don't want to fall over me and in my hair. With dreadlocks, it's like, get them out of the hair. I was like, it's too much trouble. But so it sounds amazing. However, for me, I have found another path to what for me was opening up to transformation and evolution. However, with regards to the shamanism work, something like Huna, for example, is very much about the traditions, the kahunas, working with the land. When you're out in Hawaii, for example, you go to some of the ancient sites. There's a ritual trip that you take up to the mouth of one of the volcanoes. And so there's a lot of resonance with some of the things that would happen with regards to shamanism. When I did my psychic development workshops 20 or so years ago, we were learning many of those shamanic practices. So from that respect, yes. And, I have some cool friends who practice in that realm.
That's awesome.
It's interesting stuff. It really is.
Yeah. I recently got a audio book called Spirit Hacking by Shaman Durek.
Oh, cool. Haven't read it yet. I'm saying yet. I have to get it on my list.
Well, I got it on Audible, and I'm a audio fan, so I like podcasts and audiobooks. When it comes to physical reading, I need to learn some tips from you.
we can help with that.
Yeah. But I just thought, wow, like a lot of it is to do with like manifestation, in all fairness. But there's like lots of other, lots of spiritual stuff in that. And I just thought maybe you might have some kind of connections between what you do and some shamanism and stuff like that.
When I think about higher self therapy, for example, when you're going to some of these practices, some of the things that people are doing is they're going up into the realms. If you work with the chakras, for example, the crown chakra, and that's one of the, it depends. When people come on the photo reading, if they're spiritually inclined, they will normally sidle up at some point and go, Marilyn, this tangerine technique, which is just very, very matter of fact, but they recognize that the tangerine technique, which is helping people to focus, is also connecting them to higher realms, because it is that place, because it's above and slightly behind your head. And that is why people find photo reading a deeply spiritual and healing and relaxing process, because for those in the know, they recognize that this very simple tangerine technique is actually helping them to connect. Because I had a friend who calls him, he's a spiritual mentor. He came on the photo reading workshop, and on the Friday he came up and said, you know what, Marilyn, I've already got my money's worth. I don't even need to come back for the rest of the weekend, but I will. And I said, why is that? And he said, I've been trying to reach higher states of consciousness for years. It's hit and miss. He said, with that one technique you showed us, just takes a couple of minutes. He said, I'm reaching higher states of consciousness at will. And it's because we're working in a similar realm. I'm just describing it slightly differently when I'm talking about photo reading, because we don't need to get into that side.
Yeah.
But when I'm doing the stuff with Huna and working with what you call the Avaiku, which are the Huna guides, and working with the higher self and working with the elements and the elementals. And one of the things I loved about Huna straight off the bat, in the first couple of days, we had a whole session on correspondences, where they said, in this tradition, they call it this, in the Maori tradition, they call it that, they call it this. And they listed all of the a lot of the spiritual and shamanic practices.
Wow.
And then they just told us the Huna name for those practices. And I'm like, and for me, it's a little like religion. We might be people are fighting over something. I'm like, dude, if you just listen to what that person said, they just said exactly the same as you, but one of you calls it this and one of you calls it that. So now I'm like, we're probably all leading to a similar place. We just have different names for things and different modalities for them, but they're leading us to a very similar point.
Oh, that's interesting. Very interesting. You've done some stuff on what do you call it? Past life regression.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Could you talk to me about that? First of all, what is it? What is it? I was like, past life regression. It sounds like, my initial thought, something to do with like dead people. No, that's as far as it goes.
I see dead people.
Yes.
Now past life regression. This is how I said it right up. I was sitting right here yesterday about this time, actually doing a session with a client on Zoom. And I said to her, look, we're going to do timeline therapy, which is going back into the past. And it's a similar to past life regression. And I said, this is not a sightseeing tour. What we want to do, and I said also, even if you don't believe in past lives, if your unconscious mind believes the root cause of the problem is in another lifetime, just go there. Just humor me and your unconscious mind. But the past life regression is saying, look, the premise is that if we potentially had lifetimes before the ones we have now, you might want to go back and see some of those lifetimes. You might want to go back and learn from some of those lifetimes. You might want to go back and heal some of those lifetimes. And I always say that, and the very first time I had an experience where I was like, see, I've got goosebumps just thinking about it just now. I was doing a timeline therapy session with a guy, black guy, about 6'6", almost as wide, looked like an American football player. And he came to do a breakthrough session because he was always getting into confrontation and in his work, going through disciplinary. Either he was taking out a disciplinary action or the employer was taking a disciplinary action out against him. And he started to recognize the pattern. Well, he didn't actually recognize the pattern. He came because of the confrontation. I remember that I said to him, so in all of these instances you've kind of listed here, do you see any pattern or any common threads? And he's like, no. And I'm giggling to myself going, he'll get there eventually. And then he went, me? And I went, well, I didn't like to mention, but now you mention it, yeah. So we decide that we're going to do a timeline therapy piece. So he sits down in the chair. I've explained how we're going to do it. You're going to go up above your timeline, float back into the past, because we elicit where the root cause is. And he said past lives. No, past lives or genealogical, one of the two. So I said, okay, fine. So you're going to go up above your timeline, back to the root cause. Just as we were getting started, I'm doing the induction, he opened his eyes. He said, I don't think this will work. I don't believe this. I says, dude, basically, in a nutshell, I didn't say it quite like this. I was a little bit more polite. But I did, in the end, say, look, just shut your eyes and shut your mouth and complain to me afterwards. So we do the process now. He comes back into now. And I said, okay, great. Well, now, because we work on anger first, and we're going to do sadness. So we do anger, sadness, fear, and guilt. And I said, anything, and he said, oh, can I just share with you what happened? I went, yeah, sure. So now I'm like, now I'm going from, here's the man who's complaining that it can't work, and now he wants to tell me a story. He said, the vision that came into my mind is that I was on a plantation, I was a slave. And although I was physically strong, I was watching the women around me, my mother, my sisters, the women I cared for in the village being brutalized. I was also watching my brothers and the men I cared for being tortured and beaten and killed. And he said, I did nothing. And the anger now was growing that he did nothing. But he also knew that if he did do something, he would have just been taken out. So now he's got and he said in the vision that he had of the past, the words he said was, never again. No one is ever going to take advantage and treat me like this again. And in this lifetime, he could start a fight walking down the high street where somebody just brushes past him and now he's all, ready to go. Whether or not he really was on a plantation in the past life, quite frankly, I don't care. Did it resolve the problem when we went back and healed that past life? Yes, it did. So that's the thing I'm concerned with. And I have had clients who go back along their timeline and go back into the past. They've seen things and then they've gone back to their families and said, hey, and they talked about it. And then somebody who's in the know goes, oh yeah, sounds like you're talking about da 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 da. I'm not kidding you. And there was one client who had lost her property fortune. We did the past life and she saw several generations, that there'll be a generation who had money, a generation who would lose the money, generation who had money, generation who would lose the money. And one of them gambled, but she didn't know all this. When she goes back to check, one of the ancestors that came, the one before her, had gambled the whole family pile away, the big estate, the land, on the turn of a card, because he was a gambler. Wow. And she found herself in a position where she had a business partner who absconded with the money and left her with a load of debt. So she was now, so the generation before her had money, the one before that lost the money, and it was going in that cycle. So she was now that third in that line. She lost it, not through any fault of her own. Wow. But she didn't. When we're talking about it and saying, oh, it's interesting, then she went back to check and started finding out these things that had happened. So there's an element where sometimes it's like, whoa, and other times I'm like, maybe it's your imagination, but we're using it to heal.
How do you bring all of this up? Do you do it through hypnosis, or is it, I don't know, getting some beans and throwing it on a table and chanting some stuff? How does it work?
Good idea. That could add a bit more drama.
Yeah.
We do it as a guided process. So, client will be sitting basically where you're sitting. I'm going to, I always tell people what we're going to do so they know what's coming up. And then I just say, and take a deep breath in and close your eyes. And then I guide them through the process because I do past life regression and future life progression. So depending on which direction we're going, I'm going to guide them through a process, and at various points, because we always know where we want to start, what our starting point is. We go back to our starting point. Client is guided to that place, and then once they are there, now they're either going to have an experience. So sometimes people quite visual, they maybe see, like my client saw this man gambling away the family estate. You might see, like my client saw, the devastation that was being wrought on this plantation. And for other people, they can't articulate it in words, in pictures, but they can say it, or it's a feeling. They'll get a feeling of what's going on. So it's very different for every single client. I would say, don't try and make it like a Hollywood movie. That's not what it's about. It's very different, but it's a linguistically guided process where I'm talking them through what's happening. And if they're a bit get stuck, I might assist them with a blast of Huna to get them on their way. But but could use some beans as well. Might give that a go. It'll be fun.
Why not? Yeah, I don't know, some coffee beans or legumes or whatever. But yeah, it sounds really interesting. So literally just you speaking to them, and it could be remotely as well.
It's been remotely for the past 15 years.
For the past 15 years. That's powerful.
So I started off by doing it by phone.
Yeah.
And then when Zoom came along, I started using Zoom. I now got a webinar platform, and I've now got, for the Americans, it's a HIPAA, it's called HIPAA. It's a HIPAA compliant coaching room, online coaching room. But I started off by doing telephone sessions. So I wasn't even seeing people. But as you know from Clubhouse, there's power in the voice, because you open this whole thing saying you heard that woman speak, and you could hear there's something in the voice. Not just in terms of her speech and the hearing impediment, but there's something in the words that she is saying that's going on. And it's the same way all of us have that skill. You could say to a friend of yours, hey, how you doing? They go, yeah, man, I'm good. Just in those few words, they're not good.
Tell me, what's the problem? What's going on?
Exactly. So that's the same kind of sense. And actually, a lot of even when I'm doing Skype sessions and it's camera on, I'm sometimes a bit like, ugh, because this is how I like to do my coaching sessions when I'm talking to a client. I have my eyes closed because I'm listening and I'm feeling what they're saying. And then there'll be a point where I go, hold on a minute, can we just go back to what you said about because it's either something they said or how they said it or what they didn't say. And there are times, let's say I might be doing a HUNA session, even on a photo reading workshop, and I'm with someone, I say, I don't know, I say, I feel a real pain in my stomach, or I feel like somebody's just driven something through my back. And they will sometimes just like, whoa, or they'll burst into tears because I'm feeling what they go, how do you know that? And so sometimes I'll feel something. If I need to clear it, I feel it when I know when it's cleared because it's now gone again. So I'm doing that also when I'm with my clients, or there will be times I will say something completely random and so left field. If you were listening to the conversation, like, what have Disney bunnies got to do with it? But I say it to the client, they'll go, oh my God, I watched Disney bunnies this morning. It will be so profound for them that it's just out of this world. But it's a verbal process. It's done with the voice. There are occasions where I want to have some fun with the client. I might use the dowsing rod because it's a visual thing to ask a question. Like a client might be going, well, I'm not sure. And I'm like, you are darn well sure, because I'm sure I already know kind of but I'm like, okay, or there might be times I'm like, well, there's 5 different things I could do here. I think I'm going to do this, but let me check. And the dowsing rod, people used to use these to douse for water, for example. When the rods cross, however you set the system up, when the rods cross, or they're looking for metal and gold, etc. So people still use these to this day in that context. And I use it to be a proxy for my clients and answer questions on their behalf. If they're really like, oh, I don't know, I'm stuck, I'll say, are we okay? Do I have your permission? Set the rods up so the rods are not answering me, they're answering the client. And then we'll have like, show me a signal for yes, brilliant, and it will spin. I say, okay, show me a different sign for no, and it will spin the other way, and then I can be asking questions on. So that's the closest we might get to beans and throwing them on the table. Right. This is getting too weird for you now, isn't it, Roger? He's like, no, okay, now we've just gone there.
I'm loving it. Would you say that some people have like unique healing powers, and there might be a way where they might need to find their ability? Like, not everybody has it, but some people have it, and they have to try to, I don't know, gain their power from somewhere, learn how to find their inner power, and then they'll go up some hills and again chant some words and balance on one foot.
I love it. And that's one of the things when people ask me about meditation, I'm like, look, cool, if you want to go to the top of a mountain and chant Om and do some joss sticks, cool, you can. And you can just do it on the London Underground in rush hour, because that's how I used to meditate back in the day, because my diary was very full and that's the only time I had.
Right.
I believe that we all have these innate abilities. Are we all using them? No. Are we all aware of them? No. Are we all in tune with them? No. Are we all in alignment with them? No. Do we have them? I believe we do. Now, even on social media, people will put out posts and say, so and so is in hospital. If they're religious, they'll say, can you pray for them? If they're not, they will say, can you send them some good vibes? That's healing. And there's a woman called Lynn McTaggart. I've worked with her several times over the years and interviewed her several times. And she, one of the books she wrote was Living the Field. And she still to this day runs a magazine called What Doctors Didn't Tell You. Lynn McTaggart has been doing, and there's a film called Down the Rabbit Hole. Lynn was in that back in the, probably late 80s, early 90s. They've done some experiments where they will have 2 sets of people in hospital, and they have the, control group and sample, etc. One group of people, they'll get some random strangers to pray for them. Now, even the doctors don't know which group is being prayed for and which group isn't. Nobody knows. The people who are being prayed for make faster recovery. And these are people around the world who are just praying for them. So when I'm doing energy clearing work with clients around the world, it's exactly the same principle.
Right.
And so even if someone hasn't gone on a training or gone to the top of a mountain and stood on one leg,
yeah,
can you send me some good vibes? Yeah. It's similar. Do you know what I mean? So for me, I
Yeah.
think we all have that. And when people talk about alternative medicine and alternative therapy, I'm like, dude, we've been using herbs since back in the day. So I don't like the word alternative. I prefer original, because our ancestors were probably they're probably looking down on us giggling, going, they're finally getting
Can't
it.
believe these people. It's taken them so long.
Exactly. That's sometimes the way I feel,
Yeah.
because I think we all have, you know, to give someone a hug, they're there. I think well, I don't think, my brain's like, you don't think, you know, there's an energy transmission that comes from that. To hold someone's hand when they're going through a difficult time, put a hand on their shoulder, all of that, I think, is a form of healing. Stop saying I think, I know
It is,
it's a
yeah.
form of healing. Now, are they then taking it to the next level and doing some of the weird and wonderful stuff? Maybe not. But I think we all have the innate ability to heal another human being or group of humans. And there's a whole thing. It got a resurgence when Caroline Flack, the TV presenter, unfortunately died, and the hashtag was "Be Kind." I believe that kindness is also a form of healing. When you are kind to someone, when you do an act of kindness, not because you have to, just because you can, it can change the trajectory of someone's whole day. It might even impact their entire life, because I've lost count of the number of people who can recount something that has happened, something that someone has done for them. You know, when Maya Angelou says people don't necessarily remember what they said, they remember how you made them feel. Yeah. That is a form of healing. And I think we all have that ability. And coming back to your question about, does it need to be activated? For me, when I had my soul, this is a whole nother conversation. When I had my soul plan reading done in 2013, it talked about, oh my God, when I read it, it was like seeing my whole life laid out on 5 sheets of paper. But it talked about the fact that I had the ability to be a channel, to be a teacher, to be clairaudient, and to have many spiritual abilities. However, it listed all the things I have to overcome in order to activate those skills, and all of those things that were in my soul plan, because I was looking at it in 2013. So this is 13 years after, but I'm looking at, I'm going, oh my, right down to saying one of the things that would help me would to volunteer. I became a Samaritan's volunteer the minute I sorted myself out. All of that was in my soul plan. All of the things I overcame in terms of finding my voice, I'm like, oh my God, that's exactly what happened for me to then activate, if you want to put it that way, my healing abilities. But if you'd met me at 32 and you'd said all the things I do, I would have just laughed you out of town and went, what drugs are you on? Because it would have made no sense. So yes, I think you're right. There's sometimes, and speak to many healers, there's often been a rite of passage. They would have walked what I call the archetypal journey, where you hear the call, and the invitation now is to answer the call, step across the threshold, face those challenges, be willing to go into the abyss until you go through the whole cycle and you return to the kingdom with your gifts. So in my case, the gift of healing and gift of oration, that's written in my soul plan as well. And I'm like, soul plan, that's my life.
Where'd you get the soul plan from? Who writes the soul plan? Who's the dude?
I do. Well, I'm a soul plan reader. So the soul plans now, you can cast them by hand. Oh, who's got time for that? Or now, I need someone's birth name, so the name on their birth certificate, run that through a program that produces a soul plan report. And then I will sit down with the client, I'll send them the report, they can read it, and then we do a soul plan reading where I now tell them what all the symbols mean, and how you can resolve those, what some of the limiting beliefs are that may stand in their way, some of the what can they do in terms of self-help, what can they do in terms of therapy and training. Really specific. It's very spiritual but very specific. Apparently it's very popular in Japan. And then we go through that, and we then do a soul plan realignment session to get people reconnected to themselves. And I remember a few years ago, someone who was, I think she was 55 at that point, when I said, do you have any questions or queries? She said, Marilyn, thank you so much for explaining my entire life to me. That's 55 years old. It's 5 sheets of paper and an hour or so of conversation. So it's kind of deep. It's kind of deep, but it's amazing.
Amazing. What about those cards? What do you call them? Tarot cards? Tarot? Yes. Yeah. Again, one of those. I've seen them in newspapers, the back of years ago. I think it was the Sun or Mirror newspaper, where you've got those who have the cards, and I'm like,
Oh,
come
Mystic Meg. Mystic
on.
Meg was one that I grew up with in the News of the World on a
It
Sunday.
was Mystic Meg. Oh, the stories on Mystic Meg was amazing, amazing, amazing. But yeah, and then there's the chunky dude who done the card reading. I can't remember what his name was.
Russell.
Russell, yeah. Is he still about? Or has he got
Russell was
diabetes?
about. One of my
All right.
favorites was Jonathan Kaner. He passed away, but his son still does them. But
Okay.
yeah, I think Russell's still about. Yeah.
Is he on a diet? Yeah. If not, I'm gonna hit him up. Look, let me do your diet plan, bro. You know what I mean? We'll
in fact, Russell, we were talking about you. You came to mind. Let's work.
Yeah, for real. The whole card reading thing. How does it work? How does it work?
The first thing I'm going to say, how it works is spectacularly well. The reason, so for the last, oh my gosh, I started doing it in 2016. I do a thing every month from a membership group called Tarot Tuesday. It's the favorite day of the week. And what I started to notice, I do it on Facebook Live. So anyone who wants a reading, they put a yes in the thread, because I need permission. I don't just pull out the cards and read for strangers or against someone's will, because you're getting into their energy field a bit. Right. So I just say, put a note in the thread if you want a reading. They just put yes, I do the reading. They watch the Facebook Live. I started to notice I'd be saying something in the reading which seemed completely random as it's coming out my mouth. They would watch the replay and go, oh my God, I remember that when I did it, I believe it was in October 2016, did a reading for someone who wasn't there. I was just talking to the camera. And I said, I don't know what's going on with your health, but I feel that you'd really want a second opinion. And I think you want to go and buy some organic vegetables. Completely freaking random. She watches the replay and said, Marilyn, I was at the hospital, which is why I wasn't watching it live. I decided I'm going to get a second opinion. And on the way home, I just decided to go and buy some organic vegetables. There was one woman, I'm doing the reading. Now, she's a bit like me in terms of, always on the go. I'm doing the reading. She wasn't there. And I said, I don't know. For some reason, I said, I don't think this is your thing. I really think you need to go take a nap. And and so I'm doing this reading. She comes onto the reading about 20 minutes later. And I said, oh, hey. She said, oh, I'm sorry, I'm late. I was taking a nap. And I was like, did you hear the reading I just did? This would go on and on. Or I did a reading for someone apparently. And I'd said, you're going to be offered 2 jobs in quick succession, maybe at the same time. A year later, she's at one of my workshops and she said, I didn't tell you, did I? You did a reading for me. And it also there was something in my, oh, that's it. Her soul plan talked about being a teacher. She worked for local government. So that when I said that to her, she's like, no, I'm not a teacher. It didn't resonate. And I'm like, I'm giggling to myself. I'm like, it'll find you. And then she noticed at work, one of her mentees, the words he said to her, which is why it then all started coming back to her. He said, one of my friends who started at the same time has got a mentor, but you're so much better. He said, you're such a great teacher. Can you mentor him? And when she heard those words, she realized, because I said it's not always teaching in a traditional sense. Mm-hmm. But the thing about the job was she went for an interview. She's on her way home. She meets somebody that she'd worked with years ago. And he said, hey, what are you doing in the area? She said, I've just been for an interview. He said, I didn't know you were looking for work. Offered her a job right on the spot. So just as I'd said it in the reading, and what I then did, this went on for about 1.5 years. I'm like, this is bonkers. So I went back to everyone and I said, look, I want to write a blog about this. Can I cut and paste what you've said about the reading? And I'm going to go back. And I went back. I never go back and listen to my own recordings. I went back and I listened to recordings and I did a word for word transcript of what I said. And I cut and pasted what they said later. I put them side by side. I put them in a blog because I was just like, am I imagining this, that I will say something and exactly that thing happens? And when I went and put them side by side, I'm like, no, it's pretty much. And with the readings, people often come and say, oh, thank you so much for the reading. It's amazing. And they'll say it happened, and I have to go back and go, oh, that's absolutely fantastic. What did I say? Because I'm not really listening. It's kind of, I do the card, do the reading, I'm on to the next person, because I might do 15, 20 readings on a Facebook Live.
Wow. I need to go on that live. I want to check that out. Why not get a free reading? What?
And I might pull the same card. And sometimes if there's a vibe going on with the group, I might do 15, 20 reading. The same card might come up 7, 8, 9, 10 times. Or because all the decks are behind me there, I've got about 20 different decks. I might use a completely different deck. Because one person in the membership group, 3 months in a row, I use completely different decks each month. She got the same message. And she finally laughed and she said, Marilyn, you said that to me a couple of times before. And I know I meant to do. She said, I've been meaning to do it. I haven't got around to it. And the cards were relentless in delivering the same message. So it doesn't matter about the deck, but what I will do if I'm using the same deck, sometimes I pull a card for one person, I do the reading, pull a card, the same card again later, the reading is different because the card looks different, as in different things stand out to me and I get different things that come into my mind to say for that client. So it blows people's minds. And often, I did one on Facebook Live. I'll tag you into the video, I'll find it. I got a new deck. It was a deck from the artist Banksy. For those of you maybe in the United States, Banksy is an artist in the UK, and he goes and paints things on walls, beautiful pictures. And somebody gave me a Banksy deck. So now I'm online doing a Facebook Live, and I said, hey, is anyone got a new deck? Anyone fancy a reading? A woman called Frantonia, and I use her name because she gave me permission, comes on, never met her. She's in America. She said, can I have a reading? I went, yeah, sure. So I'm shuffling the cards. I do exactly what I do on Tarot Tuesday. The cards are face down, so I can't see them. I pull them, what I call do a blind reading. So I pull the cards, I start reading. I hear a voice in my head, and it's a woman. And she's saying things I'd never say. So she's answering and saying, oh, tell baby. I'm like, what? So this is all going into my head. I'm not saying that. So I'm doing, and eventually I said, Frantonia. I said, I'm so sorry. I said, this isn't normally the way I would speak to people. But the words in my head, I relayed the words. She went, that's Granny Gracie. And seriously, everything I was saying is what Granny Gracie used to say to her. And the cards I was pulling were exactly what she was going on in her life. And at one point I said something like, if we look at you on the face of this, none of this would make sense. However, she said, that's exactly what's going on. And you're right, on the face of it. Seriously, it's all there, it's all unfolded on the Facebook Live. Granny Gracie she's giving it some and then she starts on me and starts giving me advice as well. I'm like, oh, so it was a whole comedy act, but it's all there on Facebook Live. And seriously, if I were to answer your question, how does it work? I think I call it the kind of superhighway, the conscious superhighway, where we're all kind of, there's a kind of a stream of consciousness that we can tap into at various times. And because we are kind of on the face of it energetic beings, I think there's an element of kind of tapping into the energy field, let me put it that way, because the words don't come from me. That's why I often don't remember what I've said. And there are times I might be talking, and if I'm at an event, I say, that was so good, I hope someone wrote that down, because it's just like a stream of consciousness. But I think it's tapping into that energy field, bringing down what's going to be most relevant for that person to hear. Because I remember, and his testimonials on my website, I've got a tarot page. When I was first getting back into doing the tarot readings, I went onto Facebook and my e-newsletter list, and I just asked for some volunteers. I thought 3 or 4 people, 27 people said yes. And I think I actually did all of those readings.
Oh, wow.
And for some of the people, I said, are you willing to share your feedback? And he said, yeah. So I don't want people to tell me what the reading's about, but sometimes people want to. So he said, I'd like a reading about blah. I'm like, cool. I'm pulling the cards. They're nothing to do with blah. They're everything to do with his work and his business. I'm just going to do the reading as it comes to me. So I do this whole reading thinking, geez, this is nothing that he asked me for. At the end of because he's completely silent. At the end of the reading, he says, Marilyn, he said, I wanted to do a reading about my business and my work, but I decided to ask about this other thing, which was like a diversion. The reading was about exactly what he wanted to ask about, but didn't.
Right.
Seriously. So it's all on the website in his own words. And so I always say, look, it's not me doing the reading per se, it's the energy of the vibe between me and the person that I'm reading for. And because the reason I don't really want to know, and the deck I use is irrelevant, if the cards have a message, they're going to deliver that for you.
Love it, man. Wow. That's some
I
great
am so
stuff.
impressed with your open-mindedness, because at no point have I seemed to have freaked you out yet.
No. My mind is very, very open. There's lots of things that, thank you. Sorry, my daughter just switched off the light and she's just turned it back on. Just leave it, please. I'm talking. not now, not now.
How old is she?
She's 6.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, going on 16 or
I was just
18.
about to say, you know,
Yeah,
probably, yeah.
yeah, yeah. No, but this is great stuff. Like, yeah, and thing is, when as I was going through your bio and I saw these things, I was like, oh my god, even better. Because the questions I was gonna prepare was more to do with psychology, but then when I saw this other stuff, I'm like, wow, this is cool, really cool. So I think we can wrap it up. What I'd like to know is where can people find you? So you're on Instagram. What's your Instagram handle?
The Instagram handle, it's the Neuro Success Coach, and Neuro success, that's one word. So the dash Neuro Success dash coach. Might change that, take the dashes out. And if they search for Marilyn, Marilyn Devonish, DEV for Victor, ONISH, on all of the other social channels, so LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, it's / Marilyn Devonish. It's just the Instagram, which is slightly different. That's the easiest way to find me. And my website, I'll say it and I'll spell it because it's an unusual spelling. It's transformationstm.com, and trance, TRANCE, as in hypnotic trance, formations. So F for Freddie, FORMATIONS, TM as in trademark. So transformationstm.com. And then there's a lot on the website. I've had that website for 20 years, so it's just grown.
But anything like your resume?
No, it is a bit like that, but there is a page for the photo reading. There's a page for the tarot reading. There's a page for the soul plan readings. So yeah, it's all on the website. And if anyone has any questions, then they can email me, marilyn@transformationstm.com, and happy to answer any questions.
Awesome. Do you host any clubhouse rooms at all at the
Yeah,
moment?
so I'm going to start doing, at the moment they've been random and ad hoc. So I did one on dealing with stress and overwhelm. I did one on productivity recently, how to get more done in less time. I did a HUNA one. I actually did a soul plan one. Somebody in a room was having some serious challenges. And I don't normally do this, but I said to her, I said, look, I said, if you want me to do a soul plan for you, just let me know. And then I DM'd her and said, I wasn't joking, I'll do a soul plan for you. So I did the soul plan report and I emailed it. And then I thought, this could be cool. No, I didn't email it before. And I went, no, let me ask her if she's up for this. And she can say yes or no. I said, here's the idea. What I think I want to do is do your soul plan reading on Clubhouse. So you hear it for the first time as I'm doing it. Lord, she was, I still don't know. I never met this woman. It's just a little picture. All I could hear was, wow, whoa, or silence. And I was like, are you there? She's like, sorry, I'm just taking it in. So, so I've had a play. I did a Tarot Tuesday one as well. So yeah, I've been having a play with the various rooms. And I will, I'm going to apply for a club, of course, and then start really go, because, with my membership group, we do like Motivation Monday, Tarot Tuesday, Wisdom Wednesday, Think Tank Thursday, which is a Facebook Live Ask Me Anything consultancy thing, Focus Friday, Sharing Saturday, Soulful Sunday. So I'm probably going to do something similar-ish on Clubhouse as well. And I'm always running, webinars, teleseminars, and the way to find out, just join my e-newsletter list, which you can do from the website, top left. And people get updates about, forthcoming events. And if I'm ever looking for, I used to call them guinea pigs, I now say volunteers. If I'm trying out new processes, I always go to my e-newsletter list and people can volunteer and get an experience for free as I test things out and make sure they work.
That's awesome. So these different days which you have, are they all on Facebook?
Yeah, so I've got a small membership group, and the membership is seriously one year I just undo a membership group and then never really talked about it since then. And all of these themes, they happen in the membership group. So Motivator Monday is normally kind of an exercise or something. Wisdom Wednesday is like a curated essay piece where we go through the ages, everything from Socrates and Aristotle through to Jennifer Lopez, and everything. Seriously, I'm not kidding you. When I did the Andy Warhol one, was really fascinating. The Abraham Maslow one blew my mind, and the Jennifer Lopez one was surprisingly inspirational. So I pick people and I pull out the wisdom that they shared with us throughout their life and So yeah, it's fun. I love doing it, sharing a bit of info, getting people to think in a different way.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Look, Marilyn, it's been absolutely amazing. Seriously. Absolutely amazing. Let me know when you're next on Clubhouse, because I want to definitely tune in and hear more stuff, what you got to
Well,
say.
we can maybe do a clubhouse. We could maybe do a clubhouse room. I'm sure between us, we could come up with something. You talking about maybe the physical and the body, and me talking about the mind. We can do
I
something.
talk about mindset as well. A lot to do with mindset.
Cool.
Let's
Well,
have
that's
a
going to
read.
be the perfect combination, because it would be
Yeah.
really nice to hear it from different perspectives and get the two dynamics of the different kind of energy.
Yeah, let's talk. Let's make it happen. Marilyn, been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much. And we'll definitely catch up very soon.
Wonderful. Thank you for the invite. I've really, really, really enjoyed it. And thank you all for watching.
Awesome. You take care now. Goodbye.